Hey everyone, it's Pastor Ben. I hope you're having a great Thursday so far. Sorry I wasn't able to get this video out yesterday on Wednesday as we usually do. I was thrown off this week with my schedule a little bit, but I will have a video out tomorrow, Friday morning, and we'll be able to return back to our regular Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. It's kind of been a crazy week as far as releasing these videos go, and I want to apologize for that. But hopefully we'll be able to get back on it next week with, again, a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule like we've usually been doing. Just a quick reminder, we're going to have in-person services. We're going to continue having in-person services this Sunday, May 17th, and we would invite you to be a part of those. However, if you are uncomfortable or over the age of 65, please feel no obligation to come. We are still providing our online services, and we hope that those can be a fulfilling and sufficient alternative in order that you can take part in and hopefully in a guaranteed safe environment. But if you do plan on coming, we're going to continue practicing our social distancing. It was awesome getting to see one another again, and we had everyone sitting in specific areas of the pews, as well as a special way of doing communion. We'd also encourage anyone planning on coming, if you have masks, put them on. Those can be particularly effective tools to prevent the spread, especially in a singing environment at church. And the more people wearing masks, the safer environment we can create. So if you have masks, we really would encourage you to put those on for service. I can guarantee you won't be the only one wearing them. I know I'll be wearing one for sure, and hopefully we can create that environment that is positive and healthy as possible. But we're going to be starting off a new series this morning, studying the book of 1 John. We're kicking off the book of 1 John. So if you want to pull out your Bibles to 1 John chapter 1, we're going to be reading these first few verses together. And one thing I want to go into really quick as far as the background of 1 John. As we dive in, 1 John is technically an epistle, which the word epistle just simply means letter. But if you'll notice, it does not sound quite like a letter right off the bat. Typically when we write letters, there's an expected form. A letter begins with an expected phrase. In our case, we would start all our letters with the phrase, "Dear so-and-so." First century letters were no different. They had an expected form. There was an expected greeting that was supposed to take place at the start of the letter. And if you want a good example of what that expected form would have looked like, you can look at most of Paul's epistles, as he begins with his name and his title, and then also addresses to whom he is writing, and finally ends in a specific way. But 1 John seems to skip all of these forms, as John just seems to launch right into some teaching, which makes us think that 1 John isn't your typical letter. In fact, most scholars see 1 John as a commentary or a lesson that would have gone alongside of the Gospel of John. It's why many of the words and much of the vocabulary used in 1 John is going to parallel and be so similar to the vocabulary and phrases used in John's gospel. So as we study 1 John, one thing I would encourage you to do is also be reading the Gospel of John. In fact, I would encourage you today, after you're done watching this, go ahead and read John chapter 1, the Gospel of John chapter 1. You're going to see a lot of similarities in the phrases and the vocabulary that John is using in the first chapter of John 1, and also in the first chapter of 1 John 1. And again, we would have seen this perhaps as a commentary or a sermon meant to go alongside of John's gospel. They would have been sent out and circulated as a packet. And then 2nd and 3rd John are also seen as cover letters and personal letters, also meant to accompany this packet with John's gospel. So let's start here in 1 John chapter 1, starting in verse 1. John writes, "That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at, and our hands have touched, this we proclaim concerning the word of life. The life appeared, and we have seen it and testified to it. We proclaim to you the eternal life, which was with the Father and has appeared to us. We proclaim to you that we have seen and heard, so that you may have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. We write this to make our joy complete." So John goes to describe, he starts off by describing Jesus in phrases that almost are inhuman. He describes Jesus as that which was from the beginning, that which we have heard, that which we have seen with our eyes, that we've looked at, that our hands have touched. That's Jesus. He's that which was from the beginning. He is the Word. He is the life everlasting that was with the Father and appeared to us. And he is finally described as the Son of the Father in heaven, Jesus Christ. So what John is trying to get at here in these opening lines of his letters, he's trying to make clear that as one of his disciples, he was a witness to the nature of Jesus Christ, the nature that Jesus was both a man that you could look at, that you could touch, that your hands could touch, but also God, this God who is the Word from the beginning with the Father in heaven and also on earth appearing to us as the Son in the form of the man Jesus Christ. He is both God and man. And that's something that's very confusing for us to wrap our minds around as we think about Jesus. For the first 100 years of the church's history, it's just people arguing about the word both, that Jesus is somehow both both God and man. People couldn't quite figure out how that worked. And so the church would argue about this for the first several hundred years, and many people would come up with some pretty bad ideas about how Jesus was or wasn't both God and man. In fact, even while John is writing this, there's some ideas circulating that perhaps Jesus wasn't a man. Perhaps he was simply an angelic, ghostly figure, a vision that many people just happened to experience all at once at the same time. And there was another group saying that perhaps Jesus didn't exist at all, that he was simply a made-up idea. And so John is going to be speaking towards that. He's also going to be speaking towards a third group that is saying that Jesus was just a guy, just some guy who came around, did good deeds, performed occasional miracles because God let him do that, and eventually died on the cross. But John is also refuting that idea. He's not just some guy, he's in fact God incarnate. And again, that's a very tricky idea for us to get around. And those two ideas still exist to this day. There are people who think that Jesus is simply an idea, a ghostly figure, a fable, a fairy tale that's nice, maybe something we can learn from, but not necessarily a real person who actually existed. And there are other people who believe that Jesus that Jesus was simply a guy, a good teacher, someone up there with the likes of Gandhi, but no more. And so John is going to try to communicate to us that Jesus is both God and man. And I think as we consider Jesus, we too can make the same mistake of putting Jesus more in one category than the other. And there's benefits to Jesus' manhood and also many benefits for Jesus' godhood. It's important that Jesus was fully both. But as we consider him, we usually lean towards thinking about him in terms of one over the other. And there's some dangers when we leave out the deity of Christ, or perhaps leave out the incarnation manhood of Christ. We have to think about Jesus purely in terms of both. And we'll talk about that more as this epistle goes on. But the one thing I really want to take away from these few verses is that John is establishing his authority as a witness to Jesus. John, because of his ability to claim that he was a witness to the life of Jesus, he was a witness to the power of Jesus, he's hoping that that will give him the authority to say the things he's about to say. Because he's going to say some pretty cut and dry things. He's going to say some challenging things. And his hope is that as a witness, as an eyewitness to Jesus, that will give him the authority in your life to say those things. And my question to you is, do you have that same authority in others, for others? Do you have the authority that comes about having witnessed Jesus in your life? I think all of us have some story about what Jesus has done in our life. It's called our testimony. We refer to our testimony of what Jesus has done in our life. We are witnesses to Jesus at work in our life. What is your testimony? I would argue that every one of us probably has a testimony of their whole life, some story about how Jesus has been at work in our entire life, over the course of our entire life, how there was probably a pivotal moment in our life that changed everything and set the trajectory for the rest of our life. Do you have that story, and can you tell that in a way that will give you the authority to share the good news to someone else? Do you also have your testimony just of this week? What has Jesus been teaching you? How has he been changing your life this past week? And can you tell that to someone in a way that will give you the authority to share the good news with them? What is the testimony? What have you witnessed about Jesus in your life? And can you lay claim to that witness as a way of establishing your authority in the life of someone else? Because if we can establish that kind of authority, we can spread the good news. We can give them Jesus as well. We can give them the experience of Jesus at work in their life and allow them to turn around and have that same authority in the life of someone else. We can be making disciples that make disciples the same way that John is a disciple trying to make disciples through this letter. So I hope that kind of gives you something to think about. I would encourage you to continue studying not just these few verses, but also studying 1 John 1 as you go about your daily quiet time. That's all the time we have for today, but I will see you tomorrow morning on Friday. Bye.